A strange mist appeared in a small town. The mist was white and thick. It slowly spread wider and wider. People guessed it was a natural phenomenon, but strange things began to happen. Military vehicles sped toward the mist. The townspeople rushed into the supermarket to stock up. Then suddenly, the air raid siren blared. Everyone stood still, staring helplessly outside. Fear had begun to spread. And then, they saw him, an old man covered in blood. He ran, panic-stricken. He burst into the supermarket. Everyone was startled. Closed the doors. He screamed. People hurried to shut them. Others crowded by the windows, trying to see what was out there. Suddenly, a man bolted out the door. The mist had arrived. He opened his car door, but the mist swallowed him whole. Then came the screams, horrible and gut-wrenching. Everyone ran back inside. The mist pressed against the glass. It felt alive. Inside, people started talking. Some said it was a military experiment. Others blamed chemical pollution. Some whispered it was the end of the world. A woman stood up. "I can't stay here," she said. Her child was still at home. She decided to walk through the mist to get back to them. She asked for help. Nobody spoke. Tears filled her eyes. She asked one by one, but every face turned away. She felt desperate and walked into the mist alone. Time passed in the supermarket. David went to find a blanket for his son. In the warehouse, the power suddenly went out. Then came a strange sound. The rolling door shook violently. It seemed like something was behind it. David froze, terrified. He ran back to the others, but they didn't believe him. They all went down together, some ready to open the door to fix the power. David tried to stop them. They laughed, calling him a coward. The door opened. At first, it seemed calm. Laughter broke out. Then it stopped. A tentacle grabbed his foot. Only David rushed to help. The two who mocked him froze in fear. A short man stepped in to assist, but the tentacles were too strong. With a stab from a tentacle, a piece of the boy's flesh was immediately torn off. More tentacles came in. The two men just stood there all the time. In the end, neither David nor the short guy could overpower the tentacles. The boy was finally dragged out. There came another scream. They could only quickly close the iron gate. David gave a good beating to the guy who hadn't moved just now. The group of people returned to the supermarket. They told the others, but the tall black man refused to believe it. "You're lying," he said. David offered to show him. He refused. Fear had made some people deny reality. David led others to the warehouse. The store owner saw the blood and tentacles. He poked it with a stick. It dissolved into black water. The owner warned everyone of the danger. They piled dog food in front of the glass, hoping to keep the monsters out. But human nature grew darker. People split into factions. David wanted to face the reality. Believers screamed that the world was ending. Skeptics insisted it was all fake, leading others to venture outside for rescue. David tied a rope around one of them. "If it goes slack, you'll know it's safe," he said. One person agreed and tied the rope. A group of people ventured into the mist. The last one, a strong man, tied a rope around his waist. The rope began to move slowly. Suddenly, for men couldn't hold it anymore. It rose into the air, then fell slack. Everyone stumbled. When David pulled the rope back, screams erupted. The strong man was only half a body now. Nobody dared to go out again. Night fell. There were no lights in the supermarket. They pulled out floodlights for illumination. Everyone thought they'd be safe if they stayed inside. Then, the bugs appeared. Giant bugs, creatures from another world. More and more of them swarmed. They shone flashlights and lamps at them. Outside, the bugs filled the air. At first, they thought the bugs couldn't get in. Then, the bird monsters came. They crashed into the windows, hunting the bugs. People hurried to turn off the lights. But someone, an idiot, turned the floodlights on. The glass shattered. Bugs swarmed into the supermarket. A beautiful young girl was stung on the neck. She fell to the ground. The bug flew away, but she couldn't stand up. Her neck swelled up. Moments later, she was dead. Panic broke out. Someone kicked over a bucket of gasoline, setting themselves on fire. Bird monsters came in too. Some ate bugs, others ate people. When the chaos finally ended, 3 people were dead. The burned man lay dying, begging for mercy. Not long after, some couldn't bear the terror anymore. They took pills and ended it themselves. David decided to lead a group to the pharmacy next door for medicine. The believers objected. "You'll lead the monsters right to us," they said. By now, the believers had many followers. Despite the warnings, they went outside. The believer cursed at them. "You'll all be eaten alive," she yelled. Finally, an old lady threw something at her. David led the group to set out. They carefully made their way through the mist and arrived at the pitch-black pharmacy. They groped around in the pharmacy for a while. Inside, they spread out, searching for supplies. Then, their eyes widened. They saw bodies, cocoon, and spider webs hanging in the air. The pharmacy wasn't safe. They tried to run, but suddenly one person was grabbed by a corpse behind. Just then, a big spider came and spat out spider silk towards the people. The silk landed on the ground, and the ground was corroded instantly. Everyone fought against the spider. Some people were entangled by the silk and lost the use of one leg. Some people had the silk spat on their faces and lost their lives immediately. The crowd fled to the door, only to find an even larger spider. The monster had been waiting for them. By this time, all the bullets had been used up. At the critical moment, an old man stabbed a wooden spear in his hand into the monster, and then everyone managed to escape. They ran back to the supermarket like crazy, and only 4 out of the 8 people remained. The believer seized the opportunity. She preached louder, painting herself as the savior. Her voice grew, stirring up the crowd. Many started believing her. Even those who once were beside David were brainwashed. Meanwhile, David found a soldier. They searched for his comrades, but both soldiers had hanged themselves. David pressed the remaining soldier for answers. Suddenly, the believer appeared. He grabbed the soldier, dragging into the crowd. Under pressure, he confessed. The mist was the result of a military experiment. They had tried to open a dimensional portal. It went horribly wrong. The believer screamed at him. The crowd, fueled by her words, turned violent. They beat the soldier. Someone stabbed him. David was also beaten by the frenzied crowd. The believer shouted that the soldier should be sacrificed to the devil. In a blink of an eye, the soldier was lifted up and thrown outside the supermarket. A soldier knocked desperately at the door, but the people inside remained indifferent. The soldier looked back, and in the mist, a huge monster had emerged. He muttered a final prayer. Then the creature took him inside. But the people inside laughed at this. The believer told everyone, "We've sacrificed a soul tonight. We'll do the same tomorrow." Followers of the believer had already made up the vast majority. Outside were unknown monsters. Inside were monsters of humanity. There was no escape. David made up his mind. He planned to steal food and leave, but the believer was waiting. She saw herself as the savior. "You can't leave," she said. Her followers surrounded David. "You're sinners," they chanted. "You don't believe in God. You deserve to die." One by one, knives were raised. "We need another sacrifice," she said. The madmen began to surround David and the others, brandishing their knives and launching attacks. The believer shouted, "Kill him! Kill him!" A gunshot rang out. The old store clerk had shot the believer. She collapsed, lifeless. Her followers froze, shocked. Taking this opportunity, David and the others fled in a hurry, dashing towards the parking lot. In the thick fog, everyone was seized with fear and shouted out each other's names. The clerk opened a car door. A monster appeared, grabbing him instantly. A spider also appeared and pounced on one of them. The giant monster devoured the clerk. It turned and left. The rest raced to the car. The store manager stumbled back to the supermarket. Another person fell to the spiders. Only the elderly people, a child, a young man, and a young woman became the last hope. They drove off, passing a supermarket. There was room in the car, but no one dared to come out. The car crawled along the road. David drove, heading home to find his wife. At their house, he found her body, hanging. They kept driving further and further. Everywhere, overturned cars and dead bodies. In the mist, they saw a colossal creature. It was mountain-sized, shaking the car with each step. When the creature finally left, David kept driving until the car ran out of gas. The gamble between life and death was over. The answer was clear listening to the roars outside. Imagining what awaited them, they made a decision. David counted the bullets, only 4, but there were 5 of them. David decided that he would face the most painful ending. After 4 gunshots, only David was left in the car. He let out a loud scream to vent his grief, then pushed open the car door, ready to face the monster and meet his death. After waiting for a long time, the monster didn't show up. David suddenly stared ahead, his eyes gradually filled with horror. Had the monster finally come? No. In the mist, something that made David even more desperate emerged. The rescue army arrived, carrying a full truckload of survivors.